A very warm good evening to all the participants. My name is Vidya Narayanan and I represent product marketing function in Collins Learning. Today, I welcome you to this webinar on the topic Integrating Children with Learning Disabilities by Ms. Shabnam Aggarwal. To introduce the RP, Ms. Aggarwal's areas of specialization pertains to learning disability and she has been working in this field for the past 27 years. Her formal training is in the areas of psychology, learning disability and counseling, special education, and law. These have enabled her to integrate various dimensions and concerns in her work. Her work experience ranges from working with children with learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia, to working with children with cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities, and multiple disabilities, understanding and addressing their various needs and concerns. Besides working with children, she also believes there is a very important aspect of working with families as well. Sharing information with families and working in partnership with them and the child is essential for a program to be effective. She has also been involved in simplifying, writing, and disseminating information to persons with disabilities, their families, and teacher trainers through workshops and training sessions. Some of the research studies she has worked on are focused on the right to education and inclusion of children with disability. The learning from the field and the research studies also form the base for advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities. We have received an overwhelming response in terms of questions received around the topic. While some of them will be covered by Ms. Shabnam today, there will be another session on dyslexia on 24th of July, so related questions shall be covered then. Now I request Shabnam ma'am to take over.
Thank you so much, and a very good evening to everyone. Today, as Vidya just mentioned, is the second in the series of three sessions that cover the topic of learning disability. And today's topic, we will be covering the specific learning disabilities. Last week, as many of you would be aware, we talked about what is learning disabilities, and we looked at looking at the characteristics of learning disabilities and how to identify children with learning disabilities. This helps parents as well as teachers in identifying children early in life and thereby providing the supports that are necessary to enable that child to learn better. Today's topic takes this next step and goes into looking at the specific learning disabilities. Like we mentioned last time, learning disability is an umbrella term and brings within its fold specific learning disabilities. Today, we will be looking at two specific learning disabilities, namely Dyscalculia and Dysgraphia. Dyscalculia is a difficulty faced by children in the area of maths. Understanding maths and dealing with numbers is an area of extreme difficulty for children who have dyscalculia. Dysgraphia, on the other hand, looks at difficulties associated with writing. Writing would mean handwriting, as well as putting thoughts down on paper. So we will be looking at what these two specific learning disabilities are and what are the various characteristics and strategies that can be employed in a classroom. Characteristics, including some samples of which are there on slides, showing the work of children who have dyscalculia as well as dysgraphia, will help enable a better understanding and help recognize these characteristics when you work with children in a classroom or as parents when you work with your children. Strategies, I will share some of the strategies that I am aware of, and I would like all of you to share in your strategies because all of you are teachers and highly creative people, and I'm sure you would have employed various strategies in your work with children over the years. So again, Dyscalculia and Dysgraphia, we will be looking at the characteristics as well as evolving strategies that can help children in the classroom. And these strategies we will kind of evolve together over the next 1 hour. Before we go into what is dyscalculia and what is dysgraphia, I would like to just do a quick recap of what is learning disabilities. Would any of you like to share what learning disabilities is and some of the characteristics that can help you as teachers or as parents identify a child who has a learning disability?
We are waiting for some answers. We haven't got any answers. I assume people are typing the answers.
Sorry?
We haven't received any answers. Okay, so we are getting the answers now. As I said, they were typing the answers, so it did take some time. So Vijay Lakshmi ma'am says slow to understand, and these people also do commit spelling errors. Mona Gupta ma'am says visualization, unable to read properly certain issues that the children face.
Okay.
So the third answer is from Tariq, inability to cope up with time.
Okay. Thank you so much. Learning disability is a lot more in terms of learning disability can impact a child's ability to read, write, spell, deal with numbers, or be able to write well. Learning disability, when you talk about a child with learning disability, we are talking about a child who has average to above average levels of intelligence. Second, this is a child who shows discrepancy between oral and written work. So when he speaks in class or answers a question that has been asked in class, the child may be able to answer perfectly, but when he's asked to write the same answer, there would be a discrepancy in the work when it is presented orally and in writing. And the third primary characteristic of children with learning disability is that there is a discrepancy between the ability as well as the achievement of the child. So when as teachers or as parents, you feel that there's this child who seems to know everything, who's very good at doing things or understanding things, but when it comes to scoring on a test or completing an assignment, the child faces challenges. So that there is that discrepancy between the child's perceived potential and his ability to achieve on a test. So there's that performance and potential gap that is visible. Learning disabilities is really an umbrella term which brings under its fold specific learning disabilities. Over this session and the next, we will be looking at the 3 specific learning disabilities, namely dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. We begin with dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is really a difficulty children face with maths, with numbers. Dyscalculia is defined as a specific learning disorder, which is an impediment in mathematics, and the child faces difficulties with number sense, memorizing of arithmetic facts, accurate and fluent calculation, accurate math reasoning. So basically what we are talking about is that numbers pose a huge challenge to children. Remembering the formula is again another area where the child will face difficulties. And calculating and employing those formula, or even if the child is doing a sum where he needs to add two numbers together, there may be errors in the calculation. And maths, understanding the logic behind maths is again a huge maze for the child. Dyscalculia thus is a specific learning disability that causes difficulty with maths. And the child has average to above average intelligence. The reasons behind dyscalculia is again stemming from the way the brain is structured. Like is said for all learning disabilities, the brain is said to be wired differently. Dyscalculia, it is important to remember that dyscalculia is not the same as math anxiety. A lot of us and a lot of children get extremely anxious when they are asked to work with numbers or they have a maths class coming up. Sometimes children get so anxious that it kind of creates a vicious cycle. And the more anxious they get, the more difficult it becomes for them to grasp concepts or to understand maths. As time goes by, it kind of spirals out of control and the child is just not able to relate with maths. However, dyscalculia is not the same as math anxiety. This is a difficulty that is stemming from the way the brain is understanding numbers. Though a child with dyscalculia will have maths anxiety, but it is not limited to just maths anxiety. Dyscalculia is definitely not a result of not working hard enough or not paying attention. In fact, to the contrary, children who have dyscalculia spend extra hours of work on figuring out maths, yet they are unable to find their way through it. I'm sharing 3-4 slides, which are samples of works of children. And I would like if you could just look at these slides and share what you think, what are the kind of errors you can spot in these slides and what you feel about these work samples. So this is the first one. This again is a child who's written numbers 1 to 5. This is a child who has added 72 plus 31.
We are getting some answers, huh?
Right.
Formation of numbers is an issue here. Exactly. Formation of digits are not popular.
Right.
And I think Neeru ma'am suggests there is some mirror imaging that's happening.
Okay.
And mirror images is another thought from there. And on Facebook, I'm looking for answers. Some people have suggested pressure on paper.
Okay.
That's one answer we're getting on Facebook.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, all of you are right in identifying and spotting those difficulties that those children have faced. And these are some of the characteristics of dyscalculia. Dyscalculia, a child who has difficulty with maths, has difficulty in understanding even the pre-math skills. So if you look at children who are very young, who are in nursery or play school, and children often learn the pre-math skills, comparing two objects for size and saying which is bigger, smaller, looking at shapes and discriminating and classifying according to the shape. So sorting triangles and rectangles, for example. All these things can become very difficult for children who have dyscalculia because they are unable to compare things or objects, even concrete objects, on certain dimensions. Learning to count, learning to sequence numbers. When they are asked to count in order or do oral counting also, or sequence numbers, they often lose place or they omit a number. So if you look at the first slide in the written one, there is that repetition of numbers that you can see. So again, even when the child is counting orally, the child may repeat certain numbers. So it may go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, and then the child may lose place or omit a number. So any of these different difficulties can be spotted in children who have dyscalculia. But a child with, all children will make mistakes when they're learning. All of us, I'm sure, made a whole lot of mistakes when we were that young. The idea when we look at any of the learning disabilities, we need to be very, very careful and see whether the child has had adequate or equal learning opportunities. So if you're comparing the child with the peers, you need to see whether this child has had adequate learning opportunities, whether the child is showing these difficulties over a period of time. It's not a one-off situation. It has to be something that the child is doing very often. Reciting or writing the number sequence from a given number. For example, if you tell the child, write the numbers, we often do these worksheets that write 5, 6, and then leave blanks for the child to fill in. For a child with dyscalculia, starting from a given number is very, very difficult. You will find this child going back to 1 and beginning right at the beginning till he gets to the number 5 before he can continue answering your question. Recognizing and identifying numbers does not come automatically for the child. So for example, if you show him the flashcard with the number 4 written, it will not come so automatically. The child will really need to think, and at the end of it may or may not get the answer correctly. Grasping number concepts. Once we have introduced numbers and we have got the child to recognize the numbers and to say the numbers or to count orally, the next step is to associate and explain to the child what numbers mean. So when we talk about number concepts, when we are showing a flashcard with the number 5 written, we are showing 5 pencils or 5 books and saying 5 means 5 pencils. So the child begins to understand that every number has a value and there is a concept that is associated with the number. Another difficulty you will often find in children with dyscalculia is connecting the numerical symbol with the number. So if you are saying the word 7 or writing the word 7 on the board and asking the child to put the number in front of it, the child may not be able to answer your sum immediately. The child may have difficulty in writing the numbers in the correct sequence. The numbers may not be written in the correct formation, like was shown in the slides, and one of you answered and said that there were reversals that were seen. So reversals or difficulty in forming a number correctly would be a challenge for children with dyscalculia. Here I would like to point out, reversals are not made by all children. Only some children make reversals, and it's not the only way to spot a learning disability. Though it's often kind of highlighted as one of the major characteristics, it is not seen very often. Writing incorrect number symbol. So the child may write 4 instead of 5. So if you're doing a number dictation in class, the child is asked to write the number 5, the child may write the number 4. Difficulty here could be either that the child does not remember what number symbol to write, or he may just be hearing the as a beginning part of both the numbers and figuring out what to write on his own. So there's no difference that he can spot between a 4 or a 5 when he hears it. Recognizing that 2 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus 2. For some children, it may just come automatically. For a child with dyscalculia, even if the sums are written right next to each other, the child does 2 plus 5 and probably, in all probability, will use finger counting to find the answer and go 2, 3, 4, 5 and get to the answer. In the next line where you've written 5 plus 2, the child will employ the same tactics and finger count again to arrive at the answer. So that associating that both these are the same thing is not something that would come automatically to a child who has dyscalculia. Dealing with greater and smaller. Like in the previous slide, pre-math skills where comparing two objects poses a challenge for a child. Dealing with greater number and smaller number would be an even bigger challenge because now it's not in concrete, but it is a number which is written. It's an abstract concept for the child. So here again, understanding the concept, one, what is greater, which number is bigger, which is smaller, to understand that would be one challenge. And the second challenge that would come in this is understanding the symbols that we use for denoting greater and smaller. So you have to again find strategies to help the child to understand firstly the concept behind greater and smaller, which number is bigger and which is smaller, and then to understand the difference between the two symbols. A child in primary school would find difficulty recognizing math symbols. All these symbols that are there on the slide, the sign for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, all these can be a mass of confusion for a child. And you will find that children often get confused and mixed up and use them randomly. Understanding maths vocabulary. The next slide, we will be discussing more on the maths vocabulary part. So I'm skipping it right here and going on. Reading and copying digits and symbols. So when you're looking at, if you've given a sum on the board and you've asked the child to read the sum, if you've written 1572 plus 10, reading those numbers can become a challenge for that child. Copying can become an even bigger challenge for that child. So you might find that when the child writes the numbers, they could be reversed or missequenced. So 1572 could become a 5172, a 5127, or any other order. It could also become a 3-digit number instead of a 4-digit number because the child has omitted or skipped a number. The child may show reversals while writing. When you are giving a number dictation, again, writing the number would be a difficult task for the child because it takes time for him to associate what is said and associating it with the number symbol, or if you have asked the child to write 5, for him to remember what 5 looks like and to put it down on paper will take a little bit of time. And by that time, the class has moved ahead. So again, those gaps can be seen. Number placement according to place value. Working out which number comes where. So if a sum has to be written by the child, it can cause a lot of confusion for the child because he does not find it easy to place the numbers in the correct place value. Which digit will go in the units, which will go in the tens, and which will go in the hundreds. Difficulty completing basic operations. So even if you've given a sum to the child, for the child to be able to complete the sum and solve the sum can be a difficult task. Confusion among the operations, whether he has to multiply, divide, add, those can be confusion points. Left to right or right to left. Because in reading, when we're doing English and Hindi, we are teaching the child that we go left to right. So whether it's reading Hindi or English or writing Hindi or English, we are going left to right. But maths, some things like addition and subtraction, we go right to left. So again, you need to teach these children these things. Children would often find it difficult to remember the steps or the sequence. So for example, in a sum which involves long division, what are the steps to follow? What do you do first? What do you do next? These are challenges for the child. Carrying forward or borrowing is again a huge challenge. Transferring the sum from a horizontal to a vertical format. For example, if the sum says find the sum of 240 and 540, the child, when he has to write it in a vertical format, it will be difficult because of what was mentioned on the previous slide about finding the place value, the correct place value. So for the child to figure out that 0 will go below 0, 4 below 4 and 2 below 5 will be a little difficult to figure out. And you might end up with a muddled sum. Understanding maths logic. For a child to understand that when you are subtracting something, the answer cannot be bigger than what was given as the initial figure. So if the child is asked to do 540 minus 240, the child may come up with an answer like 700, which is far more than the original value itself. So you need to understand that a child with dyscalculia does not go by logic. For another child, probably they would be able to spot their mistake immediately when the number exceeds the original value. But for this child, you need to explain what the logic behind addition or a subtraction is. Beyond the classroom, there are many more challenges that a child faces when you are struggling with maths or maths concepts or just numbers. Would any of you hazard a guess on what are the different challenges that a child would face beyond classroom situations? And what impact would it have on that child?
So looking for answers. If you have some time typing. So we have some teachers who are showing up their hands. If you could just type your answers, please. Beyond the school, exactly are the difficulties that the students face is the question. In buying, so ma'am, there is one answer that has slowly come up on Facebook. The first answer is when students go to the shops and they find it difficult to purchase. And the second thing is calculation of money, time and usage of money, some problems with spatial sense, and lack of confidence as they lag behind in calculations.
So thank you so much for.
And ma'am, one request from teachers, they say they aren't able to hear, so if you could be a bit louder, that should rather help.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, like you mentioned, dealing with money is a huge challenge that children or people with dyscalculia would face. Even adults with dyscalculia would face difficulties in dealing with money. Playing games for children, playing games, board games, which is part of childhood, keeping score, or even playing outdoor games, keeping score, is a huge difficulty. And sometimes because of these difficulties, children tend to get left out of these spaces. Telling the time, direction, one of you mentioned direction, figuring out direction, where to go, even in the day-to-day routine, to be able to organize their time in a way that they are able to achieve whatever they've set out to achieve is a difficult task. Remembering phone numbers. All these things pose challenges for a child who struggles with numbers. Some of the strategies that we use for children who have dyscalculia are maths vocabulary. When we talk about addition, we use a lot of different terms when we are doing the concept of addition. We talk about add, plus, total, sum of, altogether. For a child who reads one sum where it says add 5 and 2, and another sum which says find the sum of 5 and 2, for him it's a huge puzzle. He doesn't know what to do. As it is, he's struggling with maths, and on top of that, you add different words and different sums. So it creates quite a lot of confusion for this child. For a child with dyscalculia, and I say child with dyscalculia, but it is actually in a classroom situation, it can help all children. All these strategies can reach out to all children. None of these strategies are exclusive to children with dyscalculia or a child with learning disability. They help all children, because all children will benefit from knowing that these terms and this sign or symbol all denote addition, and they are expected to add when they are reading sum of or plus or find the sum of or altogether. And then it is important to use these terms when you're working with the child and say, add 2 plus 3, find the total of 2 plus 3, 2 and 3, what is 2 plus 3? So the child is hearing these three variations and realizing that the answer remains the same because it is essentially addition that is asked for. Explaining right to left. So when a child struggles with figuring out which way to begin, whether he should start from the left and go to the right or right to left, sometimes it is important to provide that cue to that child. So you can make a dot or just put an arrow like I have made one, so that the child finds it easier at least to begin the process of attempting the sum. A lot of schools these days, I notice, are using single line notebooks very soon. By class 2, they have switched from a regular maths book, notebook with squares to a single line notebook. For a child with dyscalculia who is already struggling with numbers, with understanding place values, where to write numbers, continuing the use of a notebook which is meant for maths, that means with squares, is always a good idea. And it doesn't matter even if he continues to use it till class 3, 4, whatever. As long as it is enabling him, allow him to use it. Teach sequentially. So when you are teaching a concept like you're doing addition, you talk about single digit addition, double digit addition without carry forward and then go on to the next step. And as you go on to the next step, ensure that you are reviewing constantly, because you don't want that the child forgets whatever has been learned previously. Number bonds or number friends is a very effective way for children to learn addition. Essentially what it means is creating a set of flashcards. So if you're doing the number friends or number bonds of 10, you create a set of flashcards which start with 0 plus 10 is equal to 10, 1 plus 9 is equal to 10, and go on till 10 plus 0 is equal to 10. So this, when it is reviewed constantly with the child, it can be done in the classroom with all children, and parents can continue to review it with the child at home. This enables the child to be able to understand addition and to add faster, to do mental maths quickly, and to really understand that pairs of numbers that make up a certain number, for example, 10, like here. We can also introduce learning through movement and games, because all activities don't have to be tabletop activities, which can be pretty boring for a child, any child for that matter. There are various multisensory techniques and games and movements that we can build into our teaching of maths. So I know that all of you are very, very creative teachers, and I would like you to share some of your ideas of how you incorporated games or techniques, different techniques or movement activities in teaching maths and making maths fun.
So we've got two options here. If any teacher would like to speak up, she can show her hand and we would be happy to unmute her on Zoom and she can speak. Otherwise, you can choose to answer the questions using the type option, chat option. So you have two options here. One is to show up your hand and share your thoughts and answers. So looking for answers on both the platforms. Okay, so there is an answer here, Mal, that we've got on Facebook and also on Zoom. The first answer is we can make a jumping game in the colliders, as the first. And the second answer on Zoom is we use Jadogyan materials also.
Right.
And we have some more answers. So we can give them objects to do additions, play a game of numbers to get 10, playing with stones and teaching addition or subtraction, manipulative materials. We can also, place value can also be explained using with house numbers, abacus, hands-on learning, and 25 good activity.
Sorry, I didn't
is what they're saying. They're saying these are good activities. We can play hopscotch. We can also play with beads.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Yes.
for sharing. Yeah. So all these are good, great activities. Hopscotch is a, just creating a grid is easily possible in a classroom situation also. And kids will all enjoy it and they will understand all these concepts well. The same strategies are used for subtraction as well. And, teaching maths vocabulary and using these terms with children. Like you mentioned, Jodogyan. Jodogyan has excellent material which can be used by teachers or even by parents at home to help the child understand maths better. Using manipulatives is always a very good idea because it gives a concrete, touch to understanding, and actually, the child can see what is happening. And if he has to add, he can see more. And if he's subtracting, he can see fewer pieces on his table. Multiplication, again, I'm not going to go into the details because it's similar strategies we are talking about. We are talking about using the, explaining the symbol for multiplication. We're talking about the concept of pairs. The child needs to learn times tables, multiplication tables, not only needs to learn, but to write and to be able to do them as a dodging activity. Flashcards are very effective for teaching multiplication because it provides for easy review. So if you have one flashcard on which you've written 2 times 2 and maybe have the answer on the other side of the card, that is an effective tool for doing a quick review of times tables with the child on an everyday basis. Using worksheets that are graded. The one thing that we also use is a grid. Sometimes for children with dyscalculia who are just not able to learn the multiplication tables, and it becomes an extremely frustrating experience for the child. You don't want that child to get to the point where he starts hating maths and he kind of feels that he just cannot do it. So you provide the tools for the child to be able to work through that situation. So what we do is give a grid to the child. I don't know whether any of you have used this grid, but it can be very effective. It can just be given as a printout. I've just kind of made a smaller part of it, but it can go on till 12 probably. And what you need to do is really teach the child how to use the grid. So for example, if you have to do 2 times 2, you look at both the 2's and come down and find the answer. So you need to teach the child how to use the grid and uh, attempt sums which involve multiplication. Again, games and activities can incorporate whatever can incorporate the child's strengths. Like you said, give so many ideas. All those ideas can also be used for, teaching addition, subtraction, multiplication. Anything can be taught through movement and games. And children, all children, including this child who has dyscalculia, will learn in a more effective, far more effective way than just doing work on paper and or the board. So one of the things that you can also do is, when they are playing basketball or if they're just playing with the ball, you can ask the child to bounce the ball a number of times, and another child bounces it another time. So you can do a whole lot of concepts. Here in this picture, you can see a basketball with numbers written on it. So if the child's hand touches two numbers, the child can be asked to add both the numbers or subtract one from the other, or to multiply the two numbers depending on the concept that you are focusing on. So again, it just makes it a little more stress-free for the child because you're doing it through activities and games. But don't even overdo it, because then it takes the fun out of fun and games. Division, again, we need to really focus on the maths vocabulary associated with division. Ensure that the child has a good base in multiplication before you even start the process of introducing division to the child. And you need to teach the child when he's doing long division that you go from left to right and not right to left here. Explain the sequence, the steps involved. What does he have to do first? What does he have to do next and next? Have these written and probably even pinned up in front of the child when he is working, so that he remembers that he has to multiply, then subtract, and then bring down the next number. So it has to be made as visual as possible. Some of the accommodations, when you talk about working with children with dyscalculia, we also talk about accommodations that can be made. Some of these accommodations can be made or introduced early on in life. If you feel that the child is really struggling, you don't want that child to have a breakdown. You want to support that child and enable his learning to the best of his ability. So allow things that can help him learn and deal with numbers. So for instance, for younger kids, if the other children have moved on from square notebooks to two-line notebooks, and this child is more comfortable using a notebook with squares, allow that to happen. Allow the use of manipulators in the class. Like you mentioned, Jodo Gyan and other manipulators that are easily accessible in the classroom, provided they don't distract everybody else. You can allow the use of manipulators in the class. So I'm sure as teachers, you will work out ways in which you can allow that child to work with manipulators without disrupting the rest of the class. Multisensory techniques. So multisensory techniques means introducing the same thing. So if you're doing a number and the child is unable to work out the number formation, you can make it more tactile, visual, or an auditory input is in any case being provided. So you make things more multisensory so that the child is receiving that same information through more modes of and able to understand it better. Help the child visualize the baseline concepts like addition and subtraction. The use of a calculator some boards, school boards like the Maharashtra Dyslexia Association has got this Maharashtra board to allow the use of calculators for children who have dyscalculia, allowing extra time, fewer questions, slowing down the pace of teaching so that if you've moved from addition to subtraction and this child is still struggling with addition, give that child a little more time to work on addition before going on to subtraction. Time to review concepts also needs to be woven in. So if you've done addition and subtraction and gone on to multiplication, ensure that you've giving some worksheets, whether it's to be done at home or worksheets in school, where the child gets that opportunity to review the concepts. Have the child be in a quiet space so that he can concentrate better and there are fewer distractions around the child. Choice of opting for another subject. One of the kids I worked with, Anu, I'll call her Anu, she was in class 8 and she was really struggling with maths, and she would actually go for a tuition which lasted for 2 hours every day just to work on her math skills. At the end of it, she was not able to get beyond the 40-45%. And when we looked at her mark sheet or, her report card, she said that it was maths that was pulling her percentage down because she was able to do well in other subjects. So here, we worked out, I asked Anu to kind of list out the pros and cons of doing maths and taking another subject in lieu of maths. And when she made a list and we worked on it together, we realized that because she was spending close to 3 hours a day working just on maths, she was not able to devote that time to her other subjects, which were her strengths. So her percentage in those subjects was being pulled down because of her maths. So she decided to opt for another subject and drop maths, which really helped her in more than one way. Her confidence in herself and her ability also improved because she felt that she was more able to, show her potential or match her potential without struggling with maths. And this is an option that is given by the CBSE board. I'm not sure about the ICSE board, but CBSE definitely provides for that subject bank from which children can opt for another subject. Dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is the second specific learning disability we are talking about today. Dysgraphia is a difficulty with writing. It affects writing abilities and manifests as poor handwriting, difficulty with spelling, and trouble putting thoughts on paper. There is an obvious discrepancy between the child's oral work and what is presented on paper. One thing I'd like to point out here is when we say difficulty with spelling, this is one characteristic which we will be talking about in a lot more detail when we discuss the concept of, we discuss the dyslexia part of it next session, because spelling can be linked to your phonic, the letter sound association. And when we talk about dysgraphia, spelling can also be due to letter formation, difficulties in letter formation or forgetting what a letter looks like, and that can cause spelling errors. I'm again going to present some samples of work done by children and would request you to keep sending in your responses on what you feel are the difficulties these children face, or what kind of errors can you spot in these samples.
I think the audience is very, very responsive. There's a lot of interaction happening while you deliver the presentation. So just waiting for them to type. Reverse of letters is what they suggested. Tulsi ma'am. Uh, then Shrikala Ajayman says, unable to identify the alphabets, capital and small letters have been mixed. The children do not know how to write in a 4-line notebook. Difficulty in understanding capital and small letters. Confusion between B and D, which is really a thing that happens with small kids. And space, spelling, difficulty in forming letters. 7. Reverse writing, omissions, font, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just overwhelmed the answers.
Okay. Thank you so much. So all these are the characteristics of dysgraphia. I don't even need to go into it. So basically, handwriting that is often illegible. The child is unable to grip a pencil correctly, avoids tasks that require writing, obviously, because anything that we find difficult, we don't want to do. The child tires quickly while writing, discrepancy between the written work and the ideas and the thoughts the child is able to express when he expresses them verbally, orally. Difficulty with letter symbols, stopping letters, keeping to lines, all those responses that you just sent in. Confusion with direction, like the B, you can see that the child has written it both ways and really left it to the teacher to figure it out. Tendency to omit letters or add or repeat letters. Writing that is irregular. So sometimes the letters will slant this way, sometimes they'll slant the other way, and sometimes it'll just be very, very straight. Impression on the paper varies. So you'll find that some words are written where the pencil has been really pressed very hard against the paper, and some are very, very faint images and impressions, and you can barely read them. Irregular spacing between letters and words, like in the last sample, you saw that 3 words had been written so close together that it was very difficult to figure out where those words end. One word ended and the next one began. Irregular size of letters. So again, the difference, say, for example, between an N and an H. So if the child is unable to figure out the size and the height of the letter, there would be difficulties in the handwriting. And when the same letters are being used in a word, then they would show up as or marked as spelling errors. So what are the strategies that we can use to enable the child to write better? One, the most important is ensure that the child has developed hand preference. Never try and move a child who writes with his left hand to being a right-handed person, because then that can really mess up even more than what the child is able to do. Correction of a grip. Sometimes children are unable to grip a pencil correctly, and these days I have a pencil grip that I have with me, which I am showing you, and I hope you are able to see it clearly. This just the child to, because there are grooves made here, the child knows where to place the fingers and hold the pencil correctly. Grips like this are easily available all over, and once you can try it with the child, if you feel that the child is just not able to grip the pencil correctly, and you need to watch out, because sometimes it becomes a distraction and it takes away from the whole concept of trying to develop a grip. Ensuring that eye-hand coordination, because handwriting is really about eye-hand coordination. So if the child is just finding it very, very difficult to do handwriting tasks, do a lot of eye-hand coordination activities. As teachers, I'm sure you know quite a few eye-hand coordination activities. You can also seek the help of an occupational therapist who can advise or suggest more eye-hand coordination activities. The next thing we need to watch out for is the positioning. When we talk about positioning, we need to look at how the paper is placed and how the teacher is positioned with respect to the child. Paper placement for right-handers, the bottom left corner is level with the right eye, and then you twist it a little. Left-handers, you do the opposite. The bottom right-hand corner of the notebook has to be level with the left eye, and then you move it to angle it a little. Teachers, ideally, if you need to see how the child is forming the letters, you should be standing or sitting to the left of a right-hander and to the right of a left-hander so that you can observe the child while the child is writing. Furniture needs to be age appropriate. If the table or the chair is too high or too low for the child, obviously it's going to impact the way the child is writing. Some children find it difficult, like when you, in your responses, you spoke about mirror image also. Cues in the help of, in the form of dots can help some children. I once had a child I worked with. She would be able to write perfectly fine when it came to writing in the notebook, which was a lined notebook with a margin. Once she made a card for me on a blank piece of paper. She drew something and then she wrote my name. I still have that card with me, and my name is a complete mirror image. So if you see that in a mirror, you will see what she had written. She had written a complete note and the entire note was in mirror image. And when I talked to the parents and spoke to them and asked them whether they've seen this happen other times, they went through her drawings, and wherever she had written something on blank pieces of paper, we realized that she was unable to get a cue on where to start. So she started writing from right to left and got a complete mirror image of what she was trying to do. So sometimes just putting a dot is enough of a cue for the child to know where to begin. Spacing, and I think this is often taught in schools in early years, that when you're writing and you need to leave at least one finger space between two words. So again, reinforcing this with a child who has a handwriting difficulty. Letter formation, we normally, when you are working with a child who has a specific learning disability, we try and introduce cursive rather than focus on print. One, cursive prevents the child from making reversals many times, because when you're writing in a cursive pattern, the chances of making reversals are far fewer than when the child is writing the same letters in print. We also teach the child how to write in families. So for example, when you're doing the C family, we are teaching the child to write C in cursive, and then taking that C pattern forward and doing the letters A, D, G, O, Q. So for all these letters, we are first writing the C and then forming the rest of the letter. Using multisensory techniques, again, it's something that is used for all learning disabilities, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's for reading or writing or spelling, or even for maths. You're trying to use as many techniques of introducing the same concept to the child so that the child is able to get that multi-input. So for writing, we can also ask the child, because in a classroom you are not able to provide different ways in which the child can practice writing. The most effective is writing in a sand tray or something, but that's obviously not going to be possible in a classroom situation. So writing in air actually just means extending your hand, extending your arm, and writing the letter A in the air with your finger or with just your hand, and sometimes even asking the child to close his eyes and write it and say it and feel the letter, so that there are less chances of the child writing the letter incorrectly. Accommodations, again, here you would, even in class 4, 5, we ask the teachers are often asked to allow the child to answer tests or give assignments orally, provide handouts, so that basically cutting down on all kinds of written tasks, whether it is, presenting work orally, providing handouts to the child, asking the child to give feedback in any other way. So for example, if a child is able to express well through, a flow chart or a graphic image, allow the child to express his ideas differently. Share strategies for the child to organize his ideas. So for example, if he has to write a paragraph on something, the child with dysgraphia would tend to, get confused on, write one thing and then that sentence probably would not connect with the next sentence. To create a kind of flow, you can ask him to write down the keywords or help the child write down the keywords for him, draw a mind map or something which can help him organize his thoughts and express himself differently or in alternate modes, or do it in a more effective way. For older children, some schools also allow the child to type. It actually depends on the child whether he is able to type using a computer, but you can allow the child to type if the child is better at typing and submitting assignments or even an assessment. School boards allow the use of a scribe for children. That means that even for exams, the child does not need to write the exam, but can dictate answers to a person who helps write. Teaching the concept of punctuation. This is a very cute handout that has been handed down. It says, basically just has this picture of cops, and it really denotes the capitals, overall appearance, punctuation, and spelling. And if, as teachers, you could probably just take out a printout and pin it near your board. So it helps all children when they're revising their work or reviewing whatever they've written, to check for all these things and help them do a better, more effective assignment. Finally, all the child needs is to be taught in the ways that the child can learn better and learn more effectively. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We've got some questions for you from the ever enthusiastic teachers. So
thank you.
Let me first begin with the first question. This question is asked by Ms. Levy. Would a child with dyscalculia reflect in other subjects too?
Yes, because a child with any of the learning disabilities, whether it's dyscalculia, dysgraphia, or dyslexia, a child can have more than one disability, can have more than one learning disability. So you may have a child who has dyslexia as well as dyscalculia. And some of the things, that some of the factors that play into, like suppose we've talked about letter formation, or, seeing how the letter flows. It can also translate into the child's inability to recognize how a letter is formed. So it's not a number is formed or a letter is formed. So again, there would be connections, but a child can have more than one learning disability. As far as impacting it is concerned, yeah, and there would be certain connects, but not totally direct connect in that way.
Okay. The next question is from Ms. Devarkonda Supriya. Her question is, how to teach tables to kids with visual and kinesthetic learning?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
How to teach mathematics tables to children with visual and kinesthetic learning?
Okay, thank you for your question. So like if a child is a visual learner, having a whole lot of flashcards or visual material for that child would be an effective way for that child to be able to learn. For a child who needs that tactile or that movement, like some of you talked about these manipulatives or the Joragyan material or games, building in games, is always a good idea. I've used a lot of, like, of course, keeping safety concerns in mind. Just going up and down the stairs is a very good, effective strategy also, because it gives them the whole feeling of more, less, it talks about, you can do addition, you can do multiplication, you can do a whole lot of things. Again, hopscotch, creating a grid, doing games like snakes and ladders or something like that. You can create your own games, you can create your own boards. There are a lot of ideas available on the net, you can explore. But the best way is to explore with the child, so that you can pick on what the child enjoys doing. So if a child enjoys say playing with cars or playing basketball, you can incorporate those techniques along with what the child enjoys doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the next question, this would be the second last question due to the paucity of time, is from Ms. Vijayalakshmi Venkatesh. The question is, what is the right age to identify and confirm the disability of a child, in a child?
Thank you for your question. Ma'am, really, because all these things are to do with the academic skills, and we can't really reach a formal diagnosis before the child is around 7. But there are a whole lot of early warning signs or early signs that the child may present. If these signs that the child presents continue to show up over a period of time, and the child has had equal or almost equal opportunities to learn, and exposure to learning has been the same, other factors remaining the same, these factors can become like the red flag points. And as teachers and as parents, you can pick on these points and explore further. As far as a diagnosis is concerned, none of us can give a diagnosis unless we are trained professionals. For a diagnosis, you need to have a team which includes a clinical psychologist who can look at, do an IQ test for intelligence, and other professionals who can look at the reading, writing, spelling, numbers, and other aspects involved in learning. It's an in-depth process, and assessments have to be done by professionals, but the underlying point is that it shouldn't be done before the age of 7 to get an accurate picture. And again, for very young children, you may need to repeat it after a few years to really, revisit it and see whether the child continues to show certain difficulties or is able to learn differently.
Thank you for that answer, ma'am. And I think it's very important for us to understand our children in perspective, and rudimentary psychological practices are not going to help. Isn't it? So I think this should be the last question. We do understand many teachers have questions, but please do excuse us. We have a paucity of time. And so I shall ask this question quickly with the further ado. It is from Facebook. Ms. Leela Rajshekar has asked this question. Some of the children are good in remembering the phone numbers and house numbers, but when it comes to writing numbers from their books, they find it difficult to identify. How to help them?
Thank you for your question. Yes, some children will show that difference or the discrepancy between their oral skills or the memories very sharp, and they are able to remember numbers and repeat them orally. But when it comes to the writing part, it poses there are further steps required and would pose more challenges for the child. For that, you need to again start from the very basics and give that exposure to that child to be able to write those numbers, to practice writing those numbers, and going through the various steps involved in the teaching of maths right from the beginning.
Thank you so much. And should we take one last question now?
Could I address one question that I received?
Yes, please.
This is by Lakshmi ma'am, and I think it was something that somebody else had also asked the last time. Lakshmi ma'am says how to convince parents who are not educated or have a lack of awareness of learning disabilities in their children. In my experience of working with children, of working with parents, I have often found that parents are pretty clued in. If a mother is working with a child and before as teachers, before sharing what we feel about the child, it's very important to understand what the parent feels about their child. So when I have an interaction with the parent, I always ask the parent what they feel, what are their thoughts about the child, what do they think their child does well. And that's a question that often stumps them because they are so focused on the difficulties that they often forget that the child has certain abilities also. So it's important to focus on that also. Second, when you ask the parent what are the difficulties the child faces, they will amaze you because their list of observations of the difficulties their children face will match yours and sometimes even exceed yours. So, it's always better to ask the parent what they feel and then share your thoughts and observations. Because if you try and say, no, I feel this, I feel that, you're putting the parent on a defensive. So you need to be on the same page with the parent. You need to work with the parent to work with the child. So if you have a parent who is opposing you, it's never going to work and it's really going to harm the child in the long run.
So thank you so much. I think you'd answered most of the questions in that sense. And also one wonderful takeaway is I personally had this, thought, what should be taught first? Is it the cursive numbers or the block is it the cursive letters or the block letters when the student begins to write? So I think you've solved a big confusion over here. So your suggestion is we should introduce the students with cursive letters.
That's my thought, but I leave it open to others to, share their experiences, and maybe if they can write in and share it later, it'll be nice to, get different views and learn from each other's experience.
Thank you so much. So I think this is an open-ended question. There's no full stop. It's open for reception. But
learning is
an
open-ended process.
Yes. So thank you so much for your time, and to all the teachers who've been here. Thank you so much for throwing in your thoughts, your suggestions, and also a lot of feedback has been generated. Most people feel very happy to have attended this session. Many people have thought that you've given a lot of ideas to help with their systems of teaching and augment with their styles of communicating to students with learning disabilities. So in that, we thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you everybody for joining in.
And wish you all a happy weekend. And please do stay safe. Like we say every day, please do stay safe. Thank you so much.